Hola chicos, in this video I'm going to explain our next project, and that's for capítulo 2, ¿Cómo es tu casa ideal? So all of us cognate ninjas know that ideal means ideal. So what's your ideal house like? Well, in this project we're going to work on a couple of our learning targets, or objetivos. Those would be 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, and 2.8. And if you look at the project description on paper, you can see those broken down. I can use new vocabulary. I can use and know what it means. I can use tener and I can use prepositions, okay? So what's that gonna look like for us? Using I, tener, ser, our three important verbs, and using prepositions to talk about a home. Well, first thing you're going to do is you're gonna draw some blueprints. So there's a couple things you have to include in your blueprints. They are not optional. First one is un cuarto de dormir. Then you have una sala, una cocina, un baño, un comedor, un jardín, or patio o balcón. Maybe your dream home is an apartment, so you have a balcony instead of a yard. That's logical. Un garaje. So totally we're looking at 7 different rooms minimum. Then inside each room you have to have one identifying piece of furniture. And what I mean by that is if you have a bedroom, you better have a bed in there, because where are you going to sleep, right? El cuarto de dormir. If you have a living room, then you should probably have some sofas in there. If you have a dining room, you should probably have a table or chairs in there, because how are you going to eat in the dining room if it doesn't have a table, okay? So you're going to draw your ideal home. And then once you've drawn it, you're going to describe the house you've drawn. So I apologize if my camera covers up part of the PowerPoint, but you can read this just as easily on the project description, okay? All the details you need to know are there as well. It's the same thing. Now, you can do this by hand or by computer. I don't really care, but it must be neat. So if you do it by hand, you need to do it neatly. I would appreciate it actually on 8.5 by 11 or regular paper, because that way it will fit into my binder when I take it home to grade. But you can use whatever size paper you want, okay? Anything smaller than that, you're probably not going to be able to fit the project requirement on. So just keep that in mind. If you want to use graph paper, go for it. If you want to use white printer paper, go for it. I'm not going to be picky about those things. I am going to be picky about the content, okay? So we've gone over what are the items you need to include. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 rooms or components, because we wouldn't really call it the yard a room. And then inside each of those, you must have that identifying piece of furniture, okay? Then you're going to write a description. So your description is going to be composed of 10 sentences, okay? These are complete sentences. If you don't have a verb, you don't have a sentence, all right? So keep that in mind. 5 of those sentences must use prepositions. And what I mean by the prepositions are the 4 that we've learned in this chapter. So your packet, your study guide packet, which has the learning targets and the super important grammar stuff, that would probably be really handy when you're completing this. You're going to want to put in al lado de, detrás de, alrededor de, and adelante de. That was the 4th one, okay? So 5 of your sentences must have prepositions, and you need to mix up ser, tener, and I. So you have to use all 3. So you might as well just do 3 with each, and then the 10th one can be a wild card or something like that, okay? So what are some examples? What might that look like? Well, you could say, la casa tiene una sala grande. The house has a large living room. That makes sense. That would describe the house. And I've used tener. Sounds great. Al lado de la cocina. Oh, awesome. We've included that preposition. Hay un comedor. And now we've switched to show that we can use a different verb, hay. Okay? So you're mixing up the words that you use, the verbs that you use, and then you're making sure to include prepositions on at least half of those sentences, okay? So those are 2 example sentences. What is super important is that whatever the sentences you write actually corresponds to the house that you drew. If you draw a house and then write sentences that make no sense, then you're not showing me that you can describe a house. And that is the essential question. What is the house like? Okay, sorry, they were ringing the bell, so I had to pause it. Anyway, if my question is what's the house like, and you aren't capable of describing the house you've drawn, then that shows me you haven't mastered that understanding. Okay, that shows me you're just parroting sentences you might have read or seen. So that's really important. The other big thing, as always, and we'll talk about this when we get to the rubric next, is do not use a translator under any circumstances, okay? I just want to be super clear about that. You will get a 0. That is all. All right, so let's look at an example. This example has some really great stuff and has some things that could be improved. The greatest thing about this example is it's neat. It's so neat. She used graph paper. She has straight lines. She color coded it. Fantastic. I don't need you to color it. I think it would be fantastic if you did. Okay, but more than anything, it's neat. It's legible. I can read it easily. She has each of the rooms asked for, and she has a piece of furniture as asked for that identifies the room. Okay, so there's that. Now, something that she could improve on are her sentences. Her sentences grammatically are spectacular, but they don't have there's only 5 of them, and there should be 10, and they don't have prepositions. So when you do yours, you'll have 10 complete sentences, and they will have at least 5 of them using those new prepositions that I mentioned earlier in the video, okay? So this would be an example that is a good guide, but needs to be beefed up a little bit, okay? All right, let's look at the rubric. So message, content, and presentation, that's that first category. So if you want a 4 out of 4, this is where 12 points goes in your quiz project grade. You need to show thoughtful and creative meeting of the project requirements. So you need to meet the requirements, and it needs to be thoughtful and intentional, okay? The information on there should be relevant, informative, and it should respond to the task. If I'm asking you to use specific things, which I am, you should use those things, okay? And then I've placed this little box over here with tener, ser, I, and prepositions in between the content and the grammar box, because what I want to make sure is really clear is that you have to use these things. So if you don't use them, then you're not completing the message content. Also, if you don't use them, you're not going to get a very good grade on grammar because you're not demonstrating mastery of grammar. Does that make sense? So you have to make sure you use those 4 components. Absolutely sure. So a 4 on grammar, and if my little picture is covering up some of this, that's okay. You can refer to your printed project description. It could have some inaccuracies, but they shouldn't affect the comprehensibility. The vocab that you use should be accurate, appropriate to the task. Okay, do you have, if you're saying something is pequeña, well, is it masculine or feminine? Is it pequeña or pequeño? Make sure you're using those concordancia, you're using the right word for the right thing, okay? Refer to your study packet again for that list of vocab when you're looking for the furniture, okay? That's a good idea. You might have minor errors, but they're not going to affect comprehensibility. What you want to look out for is in this 2 category, frequent, inaccuracies are frequent, and using anglicisms. So just taking an English word and modifying it does not make it a Spanish word, okay? There might be some cognates that we use, absolutely, but we want to be careful with that. Also, looking at the 2 in the grammar category, we'll notice that it says little control of major patterns. What they mean by major patterns are what we're studying. Right now, we're studying the fact that you can use I and you can conjugate the verb tener and ser. If you can't demonstrate that to me, then you're showing very little control of those very important patterns, okay? So just remember you want to stay focused on what the task is asking of you. So that's all I have for that presentation. We'll slide back over. In class, I will give you the due date. You will turn this in physically. So whether you do it on the computer or on paper by hand, awesome, but you're going to give it printed to me physically, okay? I will upload this video that I'm making right now to YouTube and get a QR code onto the worksheet so that if you have any questions, you can refer to that, okay? The rubric will be on the back, as always, and then I would like you to turn in your project description with your project so that I'm not wasting paper printing double project descriptions for everyone, okay? That's what I would really appreciate that. So have a great week. Make sure if you have any questions, you come and see me. We'll get stuff worked out. I can help you make sure you're on the right track. And I can't wait to see what you guys turn in. Bye.